Дамы и господа, давненько у нас не было такой премьеры, спасибо большое, что пришли. Мы постарались вас не напрягать, как и наших гостей, и назначили пресс-конференцию на чуть попозже время, чем обычно мы это делаем. Все посмотрели картину? Согласны со мной, что из 10-летней серии о Людях Икс это одна из самых лучших картин за последние годы? Спасибо большое. Я думаю, что 30-35 минут нам вполне будет достаточно для общих вопросов. Поэтому, пожалуйста, задавайте вопросы нашим уважаемым гостям и будьте предельно вежливы. Спасибо.
You don't have to be polite.
Michael, I'm here. Доброе утро. Я посмотрел первый фильм «Первый класс», посмотрел недавно вторую картину и заметил некоторые различия между вашими героями. Раньше вы немножечко дистанцировались от образа предыдущего Магнета Иэна Маккеллена, а здесь в вашем образе немножечко как-то просматриваются его черты. Это было намеренно сделано? Как вы к этому готовились? Как отнесся к этому сам Иэн Маккеллен? И не последует ли из этого каких-то других ролей, где вы его будете заменять, например, Дельфа молодого? Спасибо.
Okay. Didn't understand the last part of that question, but yes, I brought some more of Ian McKellen into this Magneto. Really primarily because we're both in the same film. So I worked more on Ian McKellen's voice and certain mannerisms. I didn't speak to Ian before filming. I just had this clip where he was doing an RSC workshop talking about how to approach Shakespeare, and that was about 10 minutes long. And I just sort of watched that over and over again. The first time I met Ian was actually at Comic-Con. So, and the last part I didn't really understand. But that's...
Повторите последнюю часть вопроса по поводу замены в других картинах.
Если сам Иэн Маккеллен оценил вашу работу в образе молодого себя, то не поступало ли предложение вам заменить его, скажем, у Питера Джексона в будущих картинах какой-нибудь?
Yes, that's a funny one. Yeah, I'd love to do a scene with Ian in the next one, seeing that James got a scene with Patrick, but I don't know if it's going to happen. This is the man to sort of ask. And Ian thought that my representation of him was shit. No, I think he was happy. He's such a gentleman. I don't think he would tell me if he wasn't, but he seemed to be happy.
Hello. У меня вопрос и к Майклу, и к Саймону. Майкл, в первую очередь мы, кинообозреватели, кинокритики, вас отмечаем как драматического актера. Это фильмы «Голод», «Стыд», недавние «12 лет рабства». Расскажите, каким образом вас занесло вообще в кинокомикс, чем вас привлекли либо жанр комикса как такового, либо, может быть, конкретно «Люди Икс». И, Саймон, вопрос к вам. С какими сложностями вы столкнулись, когда сводили две истории про молодых людей Икс и уже про умудренных опытом?
I'll start, I guess, then. This was the most complicated script I've ever had to work on. Just keeping the timeline straight and having, 8 to 10 main characters, 4 or 5 of which are really the main characters of the franchise that all need their own emotional stories, their own drama to tell. So keeping the overall story straight and then keeping each of their personal stories straight. I had note cards in my office with different colors for each character and keep them on their own timelines on a board just so I could track their stories. But it was tough, it was a very complicated movie to structure.
I like to do different things. I like to have variety. As a movie-going fan, I like to go to something which is maybe more of an escapism ride for 2 hours, where I don't have to maybe think too much, not think too much, but maybe not so invested in terms of there's some sort of social commentary. The great thing about the X-Men franchise is that it manages to hold both. I think at the core of these series of comic books and now sort of films, you have people that feel like they've been ostracized or marginalized in society for whatever reasons that may be, and I think that's a pretty universal theme. Also, by doing big films like this, it helps me to make the smaller ones. The smaller ones actually get made, they get financed. So there's a lot of positives that way in terms of the bigger films keeping the smaller independent films alive, as it were, and keeping the new talent coming up through the industry.
Тяжело ли было выступать и в роли сценариста, и в роли продюсера в таком масштабном проекте?
The screenwriter was harder than being the producer on this movie for me, just because it's such a complex story to tell. Like I was saying, keeping all of the character stories straight while also progressing the overall story of the movie, and doing that in 2 time periods, or sometimes you have different actors playing the same character, was pretty mind-bending as a writer, but also a great challenge. I grew up reading X-Men comics. And I read Days of Future Past when I was a kid, and it was one of my favorite comic runs. I never thought I'd see it on the screen, let alone be the person that would adapt it. But I was inspired by it. So I liked the challenge of this script. I liked the logic challenge, and I liked the challenge of telling a lot of character stories, in a 2-hour film that also has to have explosions and robots and spaceships and other things. So it's a hard script to write, harder to write than produce.
Здравствуйте, спасибо большое за замечательный фильм. Вопрос к своему Фассбендеру. Мы все знаем, что вы, фактически универсальный актер. Вы можете играть кого угодно, хоть в Билл Блейджа в молодости. Скажите, вы в первый раз, кажется, с кого это было сниматься в тюрьме? Кто придумал медитацию, которую вы там устроили, и кто замотался? Ну и также вопрос еще Саймону. Каково это собирать технически столько людей на площадке, которые оскароносные, знаменитые, звезды и так далее? Спасибо.
I think I got the question. I think I got the question. I'm not sure. Versatile roles. I don't know. I think I try and do different things as much as I can. I try and do things that represent a challenge. I mean, there is definitely, you know, a limit. There's always limits to what one can do, and you know, it's just trying to find where those limits are, and sometimes overstep the mark and do something shit, and then you find the limit. Yeah, I just enjoy trying to discover new characters, investigate them. I try and do different things because I don't like to repeat myself. I don't like to be in a comfort zone in my work. I try and sort of do things that scare me a little bit, and I often wonder whether I'm going to be able to represent these characters correctly. So they're the sort of things that interest me. To sort of keep a healthy level of fear alive is good, I think.
Прежде всего, это было грандиозно, действительно. И этот фильм стоит особняком, мне кажется, в ряду фильмов о Людях Икс. Он сделан в какой-то совершенно иной эстетике, в какой-то иной стилистике. Не мог бы Саймон или Майкл, если захочет, рассказать, как создавалась эта новая эстетика, каков был первоначальный замысел? Спасибо.
I just got my hair and makeup done and put on a costume. That's about as far as the visual side of it for me went. I don't really, I guess, have much input. Although, you know, I did work on the costume for the end and the helmet. So yeah, I suppose, you know, that the helmet originally we had a scene where it was going to be
The one from First Class.
yeah, and then we had another scene where I actually made it, and I sort of, you know, through these exotic metals, I forged this helmet. But then Bryan was thinking, you know, it's probably, he wanted to go back to the Pentagon and have a sort of break-in scene there, and so we flipped it. So I did have a bit of input with some of the design of the helmet and the Magneto suit. We wanted to, because there is the danger of plastic bullets that he's alive to, we thought maybe some body armor would be an idea, and this one seems that he is kind of a lone army in this actual episode. So, yeah, I suppose I've got a little bit to say. Yeah.
I mean, the aesthetic of the movie was really Bryan Singer's, and I think part of what appealed to him about this particular story was he's a big science fiction fan. And the movie is as much a science fiction movie as it is, you know, an action movie or drama. So he got a chance to do more of what he grew up loving. He's a huge Star Trek and Star Wars fan. And I think there's elements of that, traces of that, certainly in the future part of the story, and that informed a lot of the aesthetic.
Первый вопрос для Саймона. В чем заключалась трудность для вас в написании сценария, основанного на комиксах? Потому что это не только ваша импровизация, скажем так. И второй вопрос для Майкла. Насколько известно, вы примете участие в следующем фильме о Людях Икс. Как бы вы хотели, чтобы ваш персонаж развивался далее? Потому что всегда имеется поле для какой-то импровизации. Какие у вас, может быть, уже есть идеи или мысли по этому поводу? Спасибо.
Sure. The biggest challenge in writing the script, you know, there were two. One is time travel. The trap of time travel is that you have logic gaps, you have paradoxes. It's a very tricky thing to keep straight. In most time travel movies, someone comes from the future to the past and they stay in the past for the whole movie, and then at the very end you see the future and the effect of the film. In this movie we're intercutting between past and future. So the sort of butterfly effect of the things in the 1970s on the characters in the future was a tricky idea to sort of wrap my head around and then help the audience wrap their head around. But you know, there's something you said that was, there's no improvisation, and the truth is on these last few movies, there is a bit of improvisation. There is a fair amount of discovery on the day, working with the actors. I mean, these are amazing actors. They have, you know, more of a sense of who the characters are than I do as the writer, because they've now lived with these characters for a couple of movies, and they're inside them in a way that, as much as I sort of get my head inside them. I'm never wearing the costume. I'm never actually standing there as the character. So, you know, there's a lot of trust and a lot of partnership between me as the writer and the actors at crafting the film. So there is, as much as it feels like a very constructed or written movie, there is still space for discovery and improvisation on the day.
I have to say, you know, full credit to Simon, both as a sort of writer and producer on these films. There's a great openness that he has, and he's always, you know, checking in with the actors and seeing what they think about certain ideas, and just really kind of probing. And you know, on the flight over here, we were discussing the next one. Can't tell you anything, of course, but you know, so there's always that, you know, interconnection, which is a rare thing on films this size, where you really have that collaborative input. And I have to say, with Bryan as well, and Matthew in First Class, there was a great deal of that, where we were allowed to collaborate and we were allowed to try things out. So that's very appealing to me, and I know all the other actors involved.
Не первый раз во франшизе «Люди Икс» фигурируют Москва и Россия. Планируете ли вы это? Почему это происходит? И будет ли это дальше? И вопрос к Майклу непосредственно. Я так поняла, что там играет ваш сын Ртуть в этом фильме. Если это да, расскажите об этом подробнее. Спасибо.
Quicksilver. It's translated, I heard last time.
Yeah, that's interesting. I suppose the first half of that question.
Sure. You know, quite a bit of actually the original X-Men comics take place in international locations. Moscow's in some of them. The Colossus character, Pietro Rasputin, is a Russian character. And you know, it's an international cast, so for us we want to set it in you know, places around the world, and Moscow has always been an inspiring place for me. In terms of the next movie, it takes place in the 80s, and the 80s is an interesting time in Russian history and Russian-American history, so it may be something that we explore.
And I'm very proud of my son. That's my favorite scene in the movie, for sure, the scene in the kitchen. Hopefully we'll be seeing some more of him. Actually, I wanted him to be there with me on the White House lawn at the end of the film. But yeah, hopefully we'll see him again in the next film. I loved what Evan did with the character, and I loved the you know, Bryan's vision in that kitchen scene. So yeah.
Hello. Доброе утро. Вопрос для начала к Саймону. Вы являетесь, ну, можно сказать, таким вот отцом Людей Икс. Про Джорджа Лукаса существует такая шутка: давайте скорее смотреть «Звездные войны», пока Лукас ничего не поменял. Я смотрела все части Людей Икс, и я немножко запуталась вот под конец уже, что откуда. И вопрос к Майклу. Верите ли вы, что такое будущее, показанное в фильме «Главное будущее», оно действительно возможно? И мы сейчас туда движемся, если даже за обедом никто не слушает «Металлику».
Yes. Sure. Well, I'm definitely not the father of the X-Men. I'm maybe the babysitter of the X-Men. But I do, you know, feel an immense responsibility as one of the custodians of the X-Men. I grew up on the comics and have an immense amount of respect for the original writers, who were really the fathers. You know, Stan Lee and Chris Claremont and Len Wein, and a lot of writers for decades. And in terms of the second question, I'm slightly confused as well about the timeline. What we tried to do with this film was reset the continuity of the movies. At the end of our film, there's a ripple effect that impacts what would be X1 through 3 and the Wolverine movies as well. So hopefully there are things from those films, obviously, that everyone enjoys, that I enjoy, and may still have happened in the future that comes after our movie. But we've reset sort of the continuity of the films going forward.
kind of like Dallas when Bobby Ewing is supposed to be dead, but it's all a dream. Did you ever see that in the 80s? Dallas? Well, forget about it. Do I think that this is a possible future for us? You know, the bat phone. Commissioner Gordon. No, I think it's possible, yeah. I just read something the other day, I think, where they were talking about developing robot soldiers.
Yeah.
Did you see that?
Yeah.
So, I think absolutely it's possible. One always wonders whether, you know, life imitates art or vice versa, you know, when we're making films like this, or, you know, you look at the Terminator films as well, and think to yourself, is that, you know, futurists telling filmmakers what's possible in the future, or is it imagination? I remember, you know, films like Total Recall, you know, back in was that the 80s?
Mm-hmm.
You know, where you had, you know, phones where you could see the other person, and, you know, we're sort of living it now. I think it's possible. I think we have to be careful about science development, and of course war, which seems to always be prevalent. The great thing about the X-Men franchise is the idea of acceptance, and, you know, that we should accept one another. And I think when communication breaks down, we always have to keep communicating to one another. I think when that breaks down, then hostility can take over very easily. Be careful.
Майкл, скажите, пожалуйста, вы много работаете с компанией 20 век Fox. Нравится ли вам с ними работать?
Not really. Yeah, I mean, I have to. They kind of, I'm sort of doing everything with them. Also, Fox Searchlight in the States, you know, distributing 12 Years a Slave. So, yeah, I'm kind of, I'm in the Fox house.
Я бы хотела задать сначала вопрос Саймону, так кто же все-таки убил Кеннеди, если не Магниту? И второй вопрос Майклу. Если бы...
Who killed JR? Coming back to the Dallas theme.
Если бы у вас была такая возможность, как у Логана, вернуться в прошлое, то какой период реальной истории вы бы выбрали и что бы вы хотели изменить в прошлом? И хотели бы вы вернуться в свое собственное прошлое, и хотели бы вы в нем что-либо изменить? Спасибо.
I have no idea who killed JFK. It was not Magneto, that's as much as I know.
I do think, you know, the 60s I think was a pretty interesting time, but James came up with the idea of going back to biblical times. I thought that was way more interesting. It depends for how long. You know, if I was stuck there, then the 60s would probably be better than biblical times. I wouldn't go back and change anything in my history. I guess it would be kind of hard not to do a biff, which would be sort of make a few bets on races that I know who the winner is, or whatever football game or something like that. That could be kind of tempting. But in terms of going back in my own sort of history line, I think I'd go back to the womb, just because I can't remember it. So it might be kind of interesting to see what it's all about.
Наверняка было очень много сцен с хромаки, вы летали на тросах. Расскажите, пожалуйста, о съемке самой сложной сцены. Какая сцена была самой сложной для вас?
I don't think anything was really difficult. It's, I suppose each day you're just trying to make sure that you're exploring all the different options. There's a lot of technical stuff in films like this. So, you know, on the airplane there was a rig that I was attached to. Obviously there's a lot of green screen for the end section. So just really sort of the technical things, I suppose, that sometimes can be slow moving because there's a lot of variables to take into place. You know, for example, when all the weapons rise above me, and you know, those things can move kind of slowly. So that involves, you know, you just have to make sure you pace yourself differently. But I don't think there was anything like crazy challenging. Again, you know, like when the glass breaks on top of my head, those setups, you know, take time. Also, you know, taking the helmet out of the glass box. You know, all those setups are quite technical. There's a lot of technical stuff. That would be probably the trickiest.
Do you remember the baseball field? When we shot you rising off the baseball field, it was like 110 degrees and you were in that suit and helmet.
Yeah. Yeah. That was a hot day. And those harnesses can be quite snug. In order to go flying, you've got to make sure everything's sufficiently tucked away, let's say.
Вопрос к Майклу. Хотел бы узнать, роль кого хотели бы сыграть в будущем и с какими актерами и режиссерами вы хотели бы иметь возможность поработать? Спасибо.
Wow. I don't know the role really because you know, I sort of discover them as I read it, and I don't know if I, you know, want to repeat something that's been done by somebody else. Actress that I'd like to work with, there's a lot of them. I've been very fortunate to work with amazing actresses. Just worked with Marion Cotillard, Jennifer, obviously. I didn't have any scenes with Famke or Hallie or Ellen. Unfortunately, they're wonderful actresses, so maybe in the next comic book I could work with one of them. That would be nice. Meryl Streep's obviously amazing. There's so many. Directors, I like the Coen brothers. I'd like to do something with that.
Надеюсь, что в следующий раз у вас визит будет намного длиннее, чем в этот раз. И мой вопрос заключается в следующем. Вот много лет создаются комиксы о злодеях, о супергероях. Вы играли много плохих парней, Магнита тоже, в общем-то, плохой парень, хоть и с добрым сердцем на самом деле. Что бы вы хотели, чтобы ваш герой доносил до людей и до молодежи, до детей в первую очередь, которые смотрят фантастические фильмы? Что он должен нести, какие идеи, какие мысли? И вторая часть вопроса, есть ли у вас до сих пор, после такого количества ролей, артхауса и фантастики, какой-то образ, в том числе, может быть, из российской литературы, если вы что-то читали, который вам бы хотелось исполнить? Спасибо.
Comprehensive question. For kids, I suppose, you know, the thing that, you know, makes X-Men such a strong series, again, like I said before, is this concept of people that, you know, feel marginalized or, you know, because of being different or whatever it may be, society has decided to sort of keep them on the outskirts. I think that's can be a very common thing for kids, especially, you know, when you leave primary school and you go into secondary school, that can be a difficult time, and you know, kids what, you know, that feel like they're different or not so part of the sort of mass ordinary, not ordinary, but just for whatever reason they feel like they stand out or they're different, and maybe they get persecuted for that, or feel that they get persecuted. And so I think in comic book films like this, although we're dealing with mutants, these are really very human concepts. And so hopefully through these superheroes they can think, well, you know, these guys are different too, and they're pretty cool. And so, you know, find some sort of strength in that, hopefully. And in terms of Magneto, what was the question in terms of Magneto? Was he...
What ideas will bring to the...
Oh, what Russian characters?
The second question you mean?
Yeah.
The second question is about free role. And if it's possible, have you read Russian literature? Maybe it's a character from Russia?
Yeah,
you mean Raskolnikov?
Well, yes, him. Perfect. I don't know, you know, you're so steeped in great stories and playwrights. I mean, I did do a small part in Three Sisters. It was my first job out of drama school. So yeah, maybe do a little revisit there. There's so much here. I know that when I started off acting, you know, Stanislavski was really kind of a huge influence on me. That was very much an obsession for me at the beginning. So I feel like it's been part of my training from the beginning, really.
Ребята, 3 вопроса и уходим в индивидуальный диалог.
Вот вы сказали, что при выборе роли актер должен обозначать для себя какие-то границы, лимиты, за которые он не может перейти в своих действиях, исполняя роль. Есть ли для вас какие-то такие границы, на что вы ни за что не пойдете, исполняя свою роль? И еще, вот прежде всего, я переступаю через профессиональные рамки, хочу сказать, что я ваш восторженный зритель, даже, можно сказать, огромный фанат, поэтому для меня все ваши роли, на мой взгляд, отыграны прекрасно, начиная с рекламного ролика и заканчивая вот этой прекрасной премьерой. Но есть ли у вас лично отыгранная вами роль, любимая, так сказать, ваша работа, любимая ваша роль, где вы довольны собой на 100%?
I don't think ever 100% ever. I was pretty pleased with what we achieved. Well, in 12 years a slave, I thought that was pretty powerful. I walked away from that, you know, very proud and not just of the film, but you know my participation. But there's plenty of parts that I've turned down because I just know, like I did just recently, because I can think of 5 or 6 other actors that would just do a better job than I will. And that's just, you know, down to type, personality types, and Hunger would be my favorite, just because it had so many implications for me. It was an opportunity for me to play a lead role, which is difficult if you haven't managed to get into a certain level. You know, there's a list of actors that people would want to hire, and then there's another list, and then there's another list, and then there's... I was down somewhere beyond those lists, so to get an opportunity to work as in a lead role capacity and on such a film with such a history, that was pretty special. Yeah, that's what I was saying. You know, it's just that other actors would do a better job at certain parts, so that's sort of like it.
Hello, Michael. Hello, Simon. У меня вопрос к Майклу. Я большой фанат комиксов, и Магниты и профессор Ксавье мои любимые персонажи. И у меня такой вопрос. Какая у вас была любимая сцена с Джеймсом Макэвоем в обоих фильмах? И в «Люди Икс» первый класс, и в «Люди Икс» не минувшего, будущего.
I didn't have a scene with Ian McKellen.
Oh, the other neck, the McAvoy.
Oh, James? God, that guy. Well, mainly, you know, I'm just trying to sort of put him off in scenes or upstage him or make him look bad. No, James, that was the one thing about this this film that both of us were a bit bummed. I mean, I think, you know, Simon did such an amazing job with this structure, and let me really sort of reiterate how difficult it is to keep a clarity in the story when you've got such an ensemble of characters and actors, and you're moving from future timeline to past timeline, you're interwoven and working parallel. It was, I mean, quite a feat. He did an amazing job, and then Bryan did a great job realizing it from what Simon had penned. So really sort of kudos there, man. But yeah, James and I were a bit bummed that we didn't have more scenes together. But the ones that we had, you know, each of them was great. It's just, it's just a joy working with James. You know, we hit it off pretty quickly on First Class. He's a very generous actor. He's very laid back and very smart, and also just very free flowing. So we don't have to talk too much about what either of us wants to do or what we want to get. Really, we just sort of trust one another and sort of respond in the scene to one another.
Вопрос у меня сначала к Майклу, потом к Саймону. К Майклу, значит, вопрос. Вы являетесь как бы неофициальным флагманом перезапуска «Людей Икс», а Хью Джекман является как бы неофициальным флагманом того фильма, той франшизы. Каково вам работалось с Хью Джекманом в одном кадре в этом фильме? Что самое интересное было во время вашего сотрудничества? Второй вопрос к Саймону. Мы знаем, что в финале, сразу после всех титров, показывают злодея апокалипсиса. Как вы собираетесь развивать его дальше в фильме? В дальнейших фильмах?
Working with Hugh Jackman. It was, you know, that was a real treat. We had that scene very briefly in First Class, and so I got to meet Hugh for the first time then, and he's just a wonderfully generous man and actor. He's a great leader on set, and he's a great rallier of the troops. He's definitely a team player. Every week on a Friday he would arrive with these scratch cards for everyone. And I don't know, how many people do we have in that? 600? Yeah, 600 people. So that's a lot of scratch cards. And he's just a really strong leader because he leads by example, and I never ever, you know, see Hugh get angry or lose patience. That scene, for example, where he goes into the river, you know, that was, he spent all day in that water tank, and just, you know, without a peep. He's a pretty extraordinary person.
I've made, if you count First Class, 4 movies with you, but not counting First Class, 3 movies with him. And I've never seen a peep on any set. 3 movies deep, and he is pretty flawless. The tag at the end of the movie is a tag for the next film, which will be Apocalypse, based on Age of Apocalypse, the comic run. And I think what's exciting about it is it has huge...
Jackman.
Yeah, that too. I think the bigger the sort of external stakes, the more pressure it puts on the characters, which is a good recipe for drama. So I think this is first and foremost a character-driven franchise as it was comic book. So the more pressure that I can put on the characters, the more intense the drama can get. That's what's exciting about the next movie.
Давайте последний вопрос, пожалуйста.
Здравствуйте, меня зовут Настя. У меня вопрос к Майклу Фассбендеру. Сейчас Marvel в последнее время берет курс на телевидение. То есть вот успех агентов «Щита», недавно заказанный агент «Актер». Если бы, например, Marvel решились бы сделать сериал про Людей Икс, интересно было бы вам, ну, так сказать, принять участие в этом проекте, может быть, сыграть главную роль? Спасибо.
I would only consider it if I was playing the main role. No, I don't know. Yes, you know, I've had so much fun with this and working with this group of people. If the people were the same, for sure. But you know, it's always, you know, down to how the script is and who's working on it. You know, if it wasn't in the hands of these guys, then perhaps not. But if it was, you know, if it was still under the same umbrella of people, for sure.
Спасибо большое Саймону Кинбергу и Майклу Фассбендеру. Вам спасибо за вопросы. Спасибо.